Hi, so this video is going to be a sort of book review, I guess. I don't know. I started reading this about 5 days ago or something, and I just finished it about 10 minutes ago. And it's actually a brilliant book. It's not very long. It's about 95 pages altogether, and it's George Orwell's Animal Farm. And it is an amazing book in many ways. So I'm gonna say like how I found it to read. So some books, I think you sort of struggle to follow the storyline. It's hard to get into. It's like, oh, I don't really understand what's going on here. But then some parts are like exceedingly good. This book, I found it to be very. It was almost like there was a stability in reading it. It's like you understood what was happening throughout the book because it was just about animals on a farm overthrowing the farmer, Mr. Jones, and the pigs were essentially the leaders because they were the most intelligent animals and they had 7 commandments of which all the animals had to abide by on the farm. But then obviously it ended up becoming extremely corrupt, and the pigs, due to their higher intelligence, they ended up getting out of doing all the hard work and they just made all the other animals do it. And then they had changed, throughout the book, they'd changed the 7 commandments in ways in which would suit them, but not necessarily the other animals. And there was a lot of lies on the parts of the pigs, but due to the perhaps ignorance or lack of intellectual capacity of the other animals, they just went along with it. And it wasn't until the end that they realised that perhaps something had been going on, or they sort of became awoken to it. And yeah, and the pigs ended up, after demonising humans for the whole time, ended up actually sitting around a table with the humans and talking to them, and they were drinking alcohol together and playing games together. But the game did ultimately end in the pigs and the humans having an argument about them pulling 2 ace of spades in the card game that they were playing, and then the other animals at this point were peering through the window and they could not actually tell the difference between the humans and the pigs, which I found to be quite interesting because obviously the pigs were supposed to be one of their own. They were their own kind because all animals are equal apparently. But all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others, and that's a quote in the book, and that's the quote or the maxim, I guess, which replaced the 7 commandments. It was just that quote at the end, and it's a critique on communism essentially, and in particularly communism which was implemented by Stalin and Lenin in the Soviet Union. And I think it's an extremely intelligent book because it does tell that story. Like throughout, the narrative is about power, and you also know that they're trying to start a revolution because I think it was an old goat or something which had told the story about how the revolution would happen. It may not happen in this lifetime, it may happen in the lifetimes of other animals, but eventually all the fields would be full of animals and there would be no humans left because they would have all got murdered by the animals, and all the animals would be equal and happy and living a good life. But that didn't necessarily work because people, I'll say, because animals in this context are essentially used to represent people. They're not equal because we have different capacities and different abilities, and that's going to show. Like the hierarchy is essentially inevitable, and that's sort of like the work of Jordan Peterson. But yeah, it's a really good book. And it just shows that I guess communism inevitably fell. But I was thinking about this the other day. Does communism inevitably fail, or did it just inevitably fail in Russia? And I don't know. I think that's an extremely complicated question, and due to the past attempts at implementing the communist regime, should we really risk doing it again because so many people died? It's the same with Nazism, or Nazism, I don't know exactly how you say that, but do people still go on about trying to implement like some sort of fascist regime, or some sort of Nazi regime? Now look, there is a proportion of the world who are Nazis and who are racists and bigots and all these different things, like genuinely. and they hate black people, and they want to be they want the world just to be run by white people. But that's almost demonized by society because of how that sort of ideology has played out in the past. It led to the deaths of millions of people, but that doesn't really seem to occur with communism. It's like someone says they're a communist. It's like, oh yeah, they might get laughed at by the right wing people, but for the most part, it's like, yeah, that's all right. That's okay. You can be a communist. But yeah, maybe we need to reevaluate that. I think George Orwell is also an extremely smart guy because like he wrote this book in I think 1943 to 1944, if I'm correct on that, and he seemed to be extremely awake to what was actually going on in Russia at this time. I think a lot of the world was in denial, and yeah, and I think Orwell was actually left wing himself, and he believed that the working classes did need a voice, but he didn't think that communism was necessarily the solution to that because he could see the corruption within the communist regime, and a lot of people seem to be perhaps blind to that or oblivious, and he outlined it perfectly in this book. And if you haven't read it, read it because it's just so interesting. And even if you're not super familiar, you'll still get the whole idea of power and how power can become corrupt easily. You don't necessarily need to have a historical knowledge of the Soviet Union or anything like that. And yeah, it's I enjoyed reading it. Yeah, I feel like I learned a lot from it. But yeah, and I think that's all I want to say. I was gonna do one of these for a book that I recently finished reading called The Picture of Dorian Gray, but I think it's a lot more complicated than this book, which is why I was more happy just to say, all right, I can do a quick sort of review on this. But yeah, I might end up doing a review on The Picture of Dorian Gray. I think the reason I didn't really want to do a book review on that was because I struggled to derive one set message from it. It's because like I said, it is quite a complicated book with a lot of different messages, and it's one of the ones that you sort of have to read in order to really like I guess experience what's going on within that story. But anyway, I'll end off that video there because that's pretty much all I wanted to say. And yeah, so thank you for watching.